Ready, Haby? Ready, Curtis and Tierra?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see your faces more. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna mute myself and hand it over to you all.
Okay, we'll start with introductions. I'll start. My name is Haby Barry, and I am the founder and CEO of Fulaba. We provide statement jewelry from West Africa online and at some pop-ups as well. We're actually doing a Indiegogo campaign at the moment. So if any of you guys are interested, check it out, Fulaba at Indiegogo. And I am also a board member of Conscious Capitalism San Diego. We are the local chapter of the global nonprofit organization, Conscious Capitalism, and I serve as the co-program chair. And I'll let Curtis take it away.
All righty, thank you, Haby. Curtis Robinson here with LeadSelf. I'm founder of LeadSelf. We do leadership development, consulting and training, diversity and inclusion workshops, and culture work for organizations, as well as executive coaching as well. So looking forward to being a part of the panel and really getting into some robust dialogue. So thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Tierra?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tierra. I'm the Business Outreach and Communications Coordinator for the Better Business Bureau serving the Pacific Southwest. So we are a nonprofit organization throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And we provide resources for businesses and accreditation. And we're really involved with our community and consumers as well. Thank you guys for having me on the panel. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Corey, is there anything you want to share specifically about Conscious Capitalism San Diego? Just want to give you a chance if there's anything you want to highlight.
No, not at the moment. We just appreciate all of being here. We know some of you are new to Conscious Capitalism. Some have been familiar with it or know us for a while now. So just thank you for showing up and being here today. And we look forward to just having this dialogue and conversation with you all. If you have any questions about us, I'll type in the chat way you can get a hold of us for further information.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So I will, 1 second here. I realized that I pulled up some stats that I wanted to discuss, but I didn't pull up my questions here. So bear with me 1 second. Apologies, bear with me. Okay.
Just as a reminder, again, if you're listening to the conversations that we're having and something comes up for you, please take note of it or type it in the chat box. At the end, we'll have some time for Q&A, so we'd love to hear from you all too and any questions you might have.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we're gonna just dive right in here. As you know, we're here to talk about racial equality and advocacy for inclusivity in business. So I want to start with awareness. Obviously, a lot has been going on in the world with this global pandemic, with protests against police brutality, and a sort of awakening to the systemic issues in this country and around the world, particularly with respect to race. So I wanted to start with diving into this awareness and recognizing how bias shows up, particularly in corporate and small business environments. So my first question is, and Tierra, Curtis, feel free, whichever one of you wants to start. Why do you think it has been so easy up until this point for non-minorities to dismiss, minimize, or flat out ignore bias and systemic racism until now?
Well, Haby, so as you said, it is systemic. Unfortunately, there has been a complacent sense of normalcy to be biased in corporate America and small business environments. Unfortunately, minorities have voiced their opinions and concerns for years, and there has been a lack of repercussions in the hierarchy of those organizations, thus making the dismissal so easy, as you stated. And it's rare to hear about businesses, especially the small ones, being held accountable for any accusations that may have come across the HR desk, or like notes of inclusivity, a lack of diversity. In the small businesses, HR are commonly the CEOs and the final decision makers. Therefore, they don't want to have that bad association attached to their businesses, and it may be downplayed or swept under the rug, so there's really no accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll add my thoughts on this. And the question is, why do you think has been so easy for non-minorities to dismiss, minimize, or flat out ignore bias and systemic racism until now? First of all, I would say in many cases, it's not intentional. It's just simply a lack of awareness. And I think with the recent events around George Floyd and so many others has created that awareness that is now getting more attention. But if you've not had the minority experience, then you're not going to necessarily be thinking about the minority experience. I'll give an example. If you're right-handed, how often do you think about what it's like for those who are left-handed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of us probably don't spend much time thinking about that because we're right-handed, and our world is designed around being right-handed. And this really came home to me when my wife and I decided to start golfing together of late. And I was so excited I was going to buy her some golf clubs. So I got online and I'm so eager to buy these golf clubs. And I start searching for them all over the web. And there's just two pieces of information you need to know as I'm searching for these golf clubs. Number one, she's 5 foot, so she needs petite clubs. And secondly, she's left-handed. And so taking those two things in consideration, I'm searching and searching and searching. Make a long story short, it took me forever to find a set of left-handed female clubs and for a petite person. As a matter of fact, I did not find those for a petite person, only standard. So we had to settle for regular clubs that were left-handed for standard height. In other words, they didn't think about short left-handed females when designing and manufacturing golf clubs. They're very, very rare. And I would have never thought about that had I not had a wife that was left-handed and petite. So I think what that created an awareness for me is that simply, when the system or the world is designed around a specific group, we're not going to necessarily be thinking about, if I'm in the majority, I'm not thinking about the minority experience until we have events like of late that create that awareness.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Curtis. I appreciate that. And kind of just to add to that, I think it was sort of a perfect storm with like the global pandemic and people just having to put the pause button on so many things and not be going through the regular motions of work and school and children's activities and all these other events that go on. And you're kind of just faced with yourself at home and the reality of loss and disruption. And then the video of George Floyd, how it was taped from beginning to end, and there was nothing like left. There was no room for speculation of like, oh, well, we didn't see this part and he could have done this, or this could have happened. It was like in plain view for everyone to see, that 17-year-old girl that captured this, to basically be irrefutable, like, hold on, wait a minute, like, this is not okay, this is really not okay. And then the protests and the solidarity from people of all backgrounds all over the world, just magnifying this. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. So moving on, if you will, Tierra and Curtis, what are some of the ways you have seen or personally experienced bias in the corporate and small business world?
I'll start at this time. First of all, it's a tough question, because when you are a minority and you have experiences that put you in a position to where it's like, okay, did that happen to me because of my race, or because of me falling short in an area, or for other reasons? So you're always grappling with that as a minority. And also, for at least for me, I have a tendency to just continue to look within and say, you know what, I assume that happened because of something I did or didn't do. So I'll just own that and try to adjust accordingly. So that's, I think, an important thing to recognize, being a minority, is that we're always grappling with that. But in terms of having experienced racism or excuse me, bias, I have a very specific example that's pretty blatant. Two quick examples. Number one, I spent a lot of time working for Verizon Wireless. I spent 17 years working for that organization and climbed the ranks in leadership. And when I was a retail store manager, I was managing retail stores. I got a new boss, and I'll never forget getting this new boss. And he called me into his office and he said, Curtis, welcome to the team, blah, blah, blah. You've done good work. And by the way, happens to be an African-American, the only African-American boss I'd ever had. And he said, I want to make you aware of something. I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, some good news and bad news. The bad news is that although your experience has been similar to your peers, your educational background as well, you're currently making 40% less than your peers. I'm like, really? He said, yes. And the good news is I'm fixing that. And overnight, I had a 40% increase in my income. So I'm excited about that. At the same time, I'm thinking, seriously? Same credentials, same background, education, and I was actually doing really well, and I'm getting paid for it. I would have never known it had I not had a boss take responsibility to look at the pay disparity and address it. And the big question I had to myself is, would that have ever happened if I didn't have a Black boss? And how long would that have happened as I had continued to advance my career? That just multiplies on top of one another. And so that would have put me at a significant disadvantage, although I had the same title, getting paid significantly less. So that was a blatant experience. And then just one other, more on a personal note, and this is, I'll be quick, is I bought my fourth home in Colorado, loved the home, had the property for about 3 years, got a letter in the mail saying, hey, you are part of a class action lawsuit. And I'm like, okay, really? Yeah. And your lender has actually been charging you greater interest because you're a minority than their other customers that were non-Black. And the class action lawsuit resulted in me getting a refund because of them charging me more interest solely because of the color of my skin. Had I not gotten that notice in the mail, I would have never known. So those were blatant. What I can't tell you is all the experiences that I've had, experienced bias or discrimination where I wasn't aware of it and maybe even been impacted today. So those are a couple examples.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you. Tierra?
So before my career with the Better Business Bureau, I've personally experienced bias, especially being the young college student that I was in the position that I was. I'm not going to name any companies or anything like that, just just for, but my voice was not heard as much as it could have been. Ideas that I created were basically revamped and renamed and pushed out as if another individual came up with these ideas. And when they had to put a face to the work, it was not me. Basically being overlooked for the positions that I was clearly qualified for and promised over time. And it became a pattern of unjustified reasons as to why I was being pushed to the back burner. And it wasn't just me, it was other young women that were in the type of positions that we were in that were Black and Latina. So that instantly led to my departure of the company because I realized that this obviously wasn't going to be where I wanted to stay, and I don't believe in what they were doing. So, I mean, these types of experiences happen every day. And unfortunately, me being young, I did not voice my opinion as much as I do now. And I've obviously grown into leadership positions or in a position to where I've been able to voice my opinion and, correct if things were to go down that path or look like they're going down that path, or if I see anything that's biased. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to mention here, our third panelist, Gregory Lewis from Citibank, unfortunately could not make it. There was a last minute fire drill for a launch that he's leading. So we are missing him, but we're making the most of the time with our two panelists, and I'll be chiming in more as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge his absence here for you guys. So yeah, I'll touch on that question too. I think, I've definitely experienced it firsthand, and oftentimes it isn't blatant, but there's this kind of intuition, gut feeling that one has, right? That something's not right. I remember interviewing for positions in San Francisco, and one company, basically the woman told me that I wasn't a cultural fit, and it just seemed like there was some undertones there because there was some undertones there because clearly I was qualified for the job, and I had good interactions with the people that I met with, and so it just seemed like they had a different idea of who they wanted to fill this position from the senior management view. So a lot of times it's that too. It's like going out there and trying to get opportunities. And then also I've noticed like kind of being held to a different standard. Like once you're in a position and you're doing the best you can, and it's like they're kind of like looking for something wrong, where I remember I was being blamed for something that I didn't do. I was on vacation and someone who was covering for me made this mistake, but it was like immediately pinned on me. And, I had the paper trail to prove that it wasn't, but it was just like, guilty until proven innocent, kind of thing, unfortunately. And just sort of a double standard in terms of like what someone else, a non-minority, could get away with versus, me, and it's tough because, it's very difficult to prove. And that's what I've seen. And even in my discussions with civil rights attorneys, a lot of cases just don't even, get to the courts because it's just like, it's very difficult to prove what people's intentions are, and they have other, means to like blame it on other things, and it's very complex. So just wanted to acknowledge that. So moving on to the next topic here. So like now that we touched on awareness, we want to delve into the reality, right? So highlighting how systemic racism and access to wealth and wealth disparities have undermined conscious capitalism. So I'm sure many of you are very familiar with conscious capitalism. You know, we believe that business is a means to elevate humanity and provide value to everyone, not just shareholders, but everyone that has a stake in the business, including customers, vendors, the environment, government. It's a means to give value, to provide value to all these stakeholders. So want to look at how this systemic issue in this country and around the globe, how does that undermine our goal and vision for conscious capitalism, where we want people to have, you know, what they need and to, you know, experience value that business and capitalism provides in terms of, you know, being able to have conveniences and have your problems, day-to-day problems, like solved by these technologies and services. I mean, how does this like really challenge the objective and vision for conscious capitalism?
Is that your question, or we're going to go to the general wealth? Sorry.
I mean, we can. Yeah, that's true. I need to. I'm prefacing and not going exactly into the question. So, thank you for catching that, Curtis. So yeah, my question within that then is, when generational wealth is almost non-existent within certain groups, certainly within the African American community, and almost calcified in others, Caucasian Americans, what message does that send?
So for me, I guess I could say it just comes to show how much harder it is for minorities to build a lasting foundation in this country as a business or some form of mainly a business to pass down the generational line. I can't tell you how many times I've had family or friends insist that building a business, accessing funds, cultivating those community partnerships and other necessary attributes to be successful business owners would just be too difficult to achieve. I've always asked, what do you believe would be holding you back from being a successful entrepreneur? And the consensus was the disproportionate amount of support that they would receive because it's made to look easy to access funds by those who aren't really pressed for those funds, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Tierra. I would just add to that. I mean, first of all, I think the question is around what message does that send? And I think it can be interpreted a couple of different ways, at least a couple of different ways. There are those that say, of course, Blacks lack wealth. I mean, they're lazy, they're uneducated, they're not capable of doing the work that's necessary to build wealth. And as a result, they don't have it. So that's the way it is. And then these same people will then look into media and other sources to find examples of that reinforce those existing beliefs. So you have that way in which it's interpreted. But I think what's more common or more informed perspective is to acknowledge the generational impacts starting with slavery on African Americans. Let's face it, there is no other race on this land called the United States that has experienced slavery for over 200 years and discrimination and racism on top of that for over 400 years. And so imagine if you look back at your ancestry, and we're talking about generational wealth, just 2 generations ago, my ancestors were slaves. just over 2 generations ago. That's not long ago. That's not long ago. And meaning that they were working for the wealth of others. They're white slave owners. They could not by law acquire wealth. They could not buy land. They could not read books. It was prohibited, let alone get an educational institution or an education, right? So those situations were real and they actually happened. So how could they position their families, by the way, and that was another thing, separated from their families. So how could they build generational wealth when they were spending their time building wealth for their slave owners? So we cannot ignore the generational impacts of slavery. And you'll see, Haby will send you, if she hasn't already, some resources. And one that I recommended was from Dr. Joy DeGruy, who there's two things, a book titled Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, very, very powerful and informative, but she also does a talk on it. So I provided both of those resources that really help us understand the generational trauma that African Americans have experienced since racism, but all the way, and some would say, okay, that was a long time ago, slavery. Well, just over, it wasn't until like 1968 in Chicago, for example, that African Americans could buy homes in neighborhoods where there were whites. So I could go on, but the point is that we can't ignore history and how that's impacted the Black experience today and our inability, or not inability, excuse me, the increased resistance to us building wealth. We've come a long ways, but it started with a very, very strong, challenging start.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Curtis. And I want to add here just some stats that I pulled just to kind of paint the picture here. There is a real difference between what people perceive and the actual reality. So there has been research published in recent years from sampling Black and white households and the economic disparity. And so a 2018 research report revealed that the median Black household has less than 11% of the wealth of the median white household. And also, like, people have, both white and Black actually, have overestimated the progress towards Black-white economic equality by over 25%. And also, just to kind of paint the picture in terms of, Curtis mentioned 1968, right, was the time in Chicago where Black families could even purchase homes in white neighborhoods. That's pretty much like the civil rights sort of like era, right? And since then, really nothing has changed. It actually has even gotten a little worse in terms of wealth for Black families. And between 1983 and 2013, a white household saw their wealth increase by 14%. But in the same period, Black wealth declined 75%, and Hispanic household wealth declined 50%. And then I like how Curtis mentioned in terms of like education and things like that. So people might think like, oh, okay, well, if there's less educated Black people and they don't have as much opportunities, that is an explanation. But actually no, because it even exists between highly educated Black people who come from two-parent households. And it's been stated that Black families with graduate or professional degrees have $200,000 less in wealth than similarly educated whites. And these Black or Latino college graduates don't even have as much wealth as white high school dropouts. And similarly, two-parent Black households have less wealth than single-parent white households. And just one last thing I want to mention is there was another stat saying that 1 in 7 white families are millionaires versus 1 in 50 Black families. So just to kind of give you a sense of like, it's not just about education and experience. Like there is a systemic issue that no matter, even if the credentials are the same, there's still a huge gap in wealth and opportunities. So I just wanted to mention that. So going from there, my next question is, what are the ramifications of this, wealth gap as we move forward as a nation with unique global problems and new sets of challenges that we may or may not be prepared to face? Obviously, there's a global pandemic, there's natural disasters due to climate change, there's increasingly more mental health issues and trauma that's going on. So yeah, I just wanted to give that context to the audience here, but either one of you, Tierra or Curtis.
I'll go ahead and start. So we're seeing it now with COVID-19, right? Blacks are 2.6 times more likely to contract COVID-19 than Caucasians, 4.7 times more likely to be hospitalized. That's almost 5 times more likely to be hospitalized and 2.1 more times likely to die from COVID. And according to the CDC, the answers as to why would be impacts of discrimination on stress, like housing, education, criminal justice system, the impacts of those systems on the stress of African Americans, healthcare access, and Hispanics as well, Latinos and Latinas, healthcare access and utilization. Latinos and Blacks are more likely to be uninsured. Occupations, Blacks and other minorities are disproportionately represented in the essential workers that are more exposed to COVID right now, and other things like education, housing, income, wealth gaps. So if we don't see an improvement in these areas, then minorities, especially Black and Latinx, will continue to absorb the grunt of tragedies such as global pandemics and natural disasters in the future.
Yeah, that's very, very well said, Curtis. I had some of the same stats on here as well, but you've hit them all. Definitely the ramifications of this as we move forward as a nation will ultimately cause the further delay of any form of unity. The pandemic, recent natural disasters, mental unrest in communities, as we compile the long list of ongoing issues that are happening now, will continue to add to the current disparities. Between all that has been taking place over the past 8 months, we are, as in everyone, I would assume, but especially those in Black and Latina and Hispanic communities, are mentally and emotionally exhausted, and that can begin to take a toll on our efforts on these initiatives as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I also want to look at the other side of this too, in terms of like thinking about conscious capitalism and providing solutions to global problems. If there is not an opportunity for African Americans and Hispanics to be able to create businesses and social enterprises that help address these problems because of the barriers to funding and resources, it all that undermines, right? Because it's like, there's business is here to serve, right? It's here to serve the community, to address problems and provide solutions, whether it's technology or food or mental health services. Like everything that you, any service or product that you get is there's a business behind that, right? So if we don't have this in mind in terms of like helping people to start businesses and to scale and grow, then that's problematic as well, because I mean, there's a value that's not being created that could be, and it could be helping people. So I think that not addressing these systemic issues and these inequities in terms of access to wealth and capital, like it reinforces these problems, because it's like there are capable people who have the experience, who have the ambition, but they don't have the tools to like get started and get going. And if they do, and they get to realize what they're trying to do, it's gonna be a tremendous impact for the community, and help address problems that that we have, and create solutions to create a better environment for folks. So yeah, so I wanted to just mention that. So going now into diversity, equality, and inclusion in business. So principles, assessments, and action plans. So what does it mean to be inclusive in business? How does diversity, equality, and inclusion show up?
What does it mean to be inclusive in a business? Providing an equal opportunity workplace environment for the individuals working in your organization, acceptance internally and externally. You will see diversity, equality, and inclusion show up in any innovative strides within your organization, any contributions that your business decides to give back to the community, and especially while creating a workplace culture for your employees as well.
Thank you, Tierra. And I will add, first of all, I'm happy to be on this topic. This is a little more positive. The first couple were like, oh gosh.
Yes.
So I love this stuff. So to be inclusive, to add to what Tierra has already mentioned, means to facilitate an environment where employees feel that their voice matters, that their unique gifts and skills and personality preferences are valued and respected. And this is across all races. And it's often said that diversity is about counting heads, and inclusion is making heads count. Another way of saying it is diversity is being invited to the dance, and inclusion is being asked to dance. So you can have diversity without inclusion. You can have a very diverse team and them not be included, and you can have inclusion without diversity. And I would just add there's an important element for facilitating inclusive and diverse environments, and that's this idea of psychological safety. Psychological safety, and I'm sure many of you have heard of it from the Google study they called the Aristotle study, where they studied, brought in researchers, PhDs from top schools, and working with their Google leadership, did some extensive research on evaluating what constituted most highly effective teams. And the number one thing out of 5 attributes of every team associated with highly effective teams was this idea of psychological safety. And that is where people feel like they can truly, first of all, show up to work and truly be themselves. They don't have to put on a mask, pretend like they're somebody they're not. They can truly show up and be themselves. Secondly, they can speak up. They can challenge ideas. They can make recommendations without fear of retribution, without fear of retaliation. So psychological safety is foundational for facilitating an inclusive and diverse environment. But when you do have the foundation of psychological safety, you have a diverse team, you have the ingredients to facilitate an inclusive environment where people feel like they're truly valued and that they matter on the team.
Thank you for that. I like that illustration of, diversity is external, the counting of heads, and inclusivity is more internal. Can I actually share my view and making each person count. That's a great way of illustrating it. And I'm glad that you also talked about psychological safety. I remember I read a book, I think it was called The Culture Code, where, and again, we'll send a comprehensive list of resources afterwards, along with the recording of this panel. And so I'll get the specifics, but I remember the author talking about belonging and safety and how those things are really important so that people feel like, okay, I'm truly a part of this team, I'm valued, and I can speak up and share, I can be who I am. And that's really how you make the most out of teams. You know, like you're not gonna get the best performance out of your team if people are just kind of like afraid and just, you know, doing what they think that you expect only, and are not challenging themselves or the organization. I mean, that's not how you get better. That's not how you leverage diverse minds and experiences, because like Curtis said, diversity is not just how someone looks and how they carry themselves, but it's their wealth of knowledge and experience. So, and that's both professional and personal. Yeah, so thank you guys for that.
Abby, before you move on, I just wanted to say, just add, Delinda in the chat mentioned that there's substantial data that supports diversity in the workplace leads to greater innovation, creativity, and financial success. And that is absolutely a result of leaders creating an environment where these diverse ideas are fostered to drive innovation and creativity, ultimately impacting business results. So I just wanted to call out Delinda for making reference to that.
I wanted to call out Curtis. You know, I'm sorry, is there a camera in here? Because I used psychological safety in my last meeting 4 times. And I thought, what a great feat. But, you know, at the Port of San Diego, I started about 4 years ago, and I am in the people and organizational development aspect of the port. Diversity and inclusion is part of the HR department. And in 4 years, I'm basically telling them it is actually an organizational development aspect rather than an HR. No offense to my HR friends. But as I was going through everything the port was doing, I will not say the port was going through the motions about diversity and inclusion. They had all the box ticked, but that's all they had. They didn't promote it. They didn't brand it. They didn't celebrate it. And you know, in my very first board meeting 4 years ago, 2016, a discussion of, and each fall, I started in August of that year. In September, an amazing employee would give the yearly update on diversity. And I kind of thought to myself, once a year, that's about it. And of course, the numbers were impressive, and you know, and what the port was doing, all those boxes they were ticking. And I just kept looking down at my notes as that I was in the board meeting, listening to Shirley give this tremendous presentation. And a board member of color, I have to make sure that I say this correctly, because of color actually said the port doesn't do enough about diversity and inclusion. When that board member was sitting next to the first woman CEO of any port in the history of ports, when 2 executives on the executive team, women of color, and I thought to myself, well, what does that board member think diversity is? So for 4 years, it's been more about the education of the celebration of the fact that we have diversity, that we're doing our best. You know, when social unrest in the middle of the summer was at its worst, we decided we were going to send out a pulse survey to our employees and just simply ask, how are you doing? And what came back was a kind of a a lack of education on really on what they were feeling. You know, we have 155 heartbeats of our 575 heartbeats at the port that are police officers or harbor policemen, and caught up in that type of a, you know, so I just think, you know, getting back to the original question, to me, what you're all talking about and is very important and super, you know, it's touching me in the right ways, because, you know, everything is built on a relationship. Well, a relationship is built on trust. And once you have trust, you have vulnerability. And that's where the psychological safety comes from. If I can come to a place where I can talk about anything, then I'm in a really good place. It's hard to get there. It really is hard to get there. It's hard to get people to that point. But to get back to your original question, you know, the Port of San Diego is doing a good job ticking the boxes. We just got to get them now to actually, okay, you tick the box. Can we go down to procurement? Let's talk about how we procure vendors. And can we look into increasing the opportunity for business owners, consultants, or whatever they do, that are Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, things like that. Not just put it out there that we have diversity, but actually promote and get businesses to understand that the Port of San Diego is actually up in the bar on that, and we'll level the playing field as much as we can. So I was a little all over the place, and it had to do with psychological safety, but Curtis, that literally to me was the thing. It's like, you know what? We're just ticking the boxes here. And 4 years later, are we ticking them still? Yes. Are we getting better at it?
Thank you so much for sharing these insights. I didn't get your name. I see that Denike is your last name, maybe. Tim. Okay. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate you chiming in here. We do have some time for Q&A towards the end, so I do have some questions I want to get through with the panelists before we open it up. But thank you for giving us some insight on what's happening in Port of San Diego, and your appreciation for Curtis mentioning psychological safety here. So my next question was, tell us about some standards for DEI at your organization or organizations that you've worked with.
I can go ahead and start, because I love talking about what our BBB does specifically. The Better Business Bureau serving the Pacific Southwest. We serve Greater Arizona and Southern California, and we have implemented a variety of measures to build employee cohesion, culture, and form some tenured employees by implementing these strategies. BBB's leadership definitely genuinely cares about the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of all of our staff. Our people and culture team, which is a fun way to say HR, our people and culture team regularly survey employees and get an understanding of what could be done better, what is going well, and just how are we doing as employees, just genuinely, so that they can get an understanding of where we're coming from. For example, we currently have an internal team called the Idea Committee. And the mission statement, I'm going to read it off here. It's to build a culture of inclusion, equity, respect, safety, and anti-racism in our workplace and community, where diversity is not only recognized, but celebrated. So it's just basically embracing everyone with the utmost respect. And yeah, it should be the goal within every organization, to be honest. So
how often do you do this polling?
So we also have a team committee. It's to educate. The acronym is to educate and motivate our staff. The team committee, we do those regularly around, we do them once every 3 months, just to get an idea of what we need to be doing as far as, because our culture is super fun. We always do like staff events and things like that. We just want to get an idea of what we can do just to keep staff motivated and uplifted. And then the Idea Committee, which was formed about 3 or 4 months ago. So it's still a new program, but we've done actually 5 surveys within the past couple months. So we're just getting a consistent idea of what's going on in the minds of our employees right now. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Curtis?
Yeah, I would just add to that, organizations that we work with at LeadSelf, some best practices that I'm seeing in companies, and it's not super unfamiliar or pretty popular, but first is employee resource groups. So the establishment of employee-led groups that represent diverse people in the organization, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's those that parents with children, or whether it's those of Asian population or what have you, where it's a safe space where people can come together and have real dialogue about their experience as a diverse individual in the organization, but most importantly, where they can consolidate their ideas and thoughts and suggestions to help improve diversity and inclusion within the organization to senior leadership. So that's something I've seen to be very effective. Also, similar to surveys, companies hire my company to come in and do what we call a culture pulse, where myself and one of my employees, we go in and we interview a segment of employees specifically around diversity and inclusion questions, so that although senior management and HR departments feel that they're doing all these things around diversity and inclusion, but number one, is it really relevant to the employees? Are they seeing a difference? And what's their perspective on what's working and what's not? So we go get that information, we summarize it in both a quantitative and a qualitative way, and present that back to leadership. And that is a system or a standard that's been integrated in some organizations we work with to ensure that they're inspecting what they expect, and that they're providing an avenue to hear back from their employees to help inform their diversity and inclusion efforts and improvement areas where that's needed. So those are a couple of things to bring up.
Nice. Thank you. So tell us, why do you think many DEI efforts at organizations are either ineffective or simply non-existent?
I'll jump in here. I think the number one reason, well, a top reason that DEI efforts fail is because they are not supported and driven by senior leadership. If senior leaders on the team are not bought in and driving diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, it's very unlikely that they will stick. Too often they are delegated to HR to go do that diversity and DEI stuff and report back to us. And candidly, that's not effective. So I would say first and foremost is when leadership, executive, senior leadership is not bought in and not driving the discussion, starting with them. So for example, what that would look like is that the leadership team starts with implicit bias training or inclusive leadership training. It starts with them. Then they share their experiences with the organization and saying, we're doing this because of the experience we've had, and we recognize we need to improve in this area. And then it's driven downward from there, but it needs to start with leadership. And secondly, too often DEI initiatives are created and driven by HR departments or leadership teams without the input of the employees. So that's a big miss. And then they wonder why they're not sticking. So again, we help organizations amplify the voice of the employees so senior leadership can now hear what the employees are saying they need in regards to DEI, versus it being a check mark for the senior team to check off to say we did these initiatives. They need to matter to the employees. So that's another reason I would add.
Thank you, Tierra.
Yeah, Curtis, I completely agree. Especially organizations also don't involve those who are, like you said, being directly affected, and employees. I'm sure employees are often directly affected by the current ongoing events. So if they are not involved and there isn't some sort of consistent way of getting their feedback? How are you going to actually address the issues that are coming about? It's definitely imperative that employees are included in the discussion of organization changes, and addressing DEI in the workplace anonymously is always the recommended way to go about doing it, to get the most truthful feedback and compile that information, and then address the problems head on. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, and I want to just add too, like, just like Curtis was saying, talking about leadership, senior leadership being bought in, it's also integrating it into the strategy. You know,
Yes.
this is not just something separate, like, oh yeah, that DEI thing we have to do. No, it should be integrated into the strategy, into the outlook of the business, because you know, we're in a diverse country, we're in a diverse world. So I mean, and I think someone mentioned this before, in terms of like, it's a business objective too. You know, like you want to grow, you want to sustain. You can't ignore DEI, because your customers are diverse, your suppliers are, you know, I mean, so, and then going back to the safety and bringing the most out of your team, you know, so it should be integral to the outlook of everything, and not just another checkbox, another aside. I think a lot of times, even though senior leadership is aware of it and they want to do something, they're not thinking of it as connected to the business itself. And so therefore it gets deprioritized. It's like, oh, we have to do this and we have to focus on, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they're not seeing that it's all connected. So I just wanted to mention that. So moving on, to what degree does self-awareness and emotional and spiritual development lend itself to practicing business in an equitable and inclusive manner?
So if a person's character and motives are ill-intended, or on a personal level, it doesn't stop once they enter the office doors. So sooner or later, the negative personal ideology will integrate into the professional space as well. People who harbor bias or racist views do not have an on and off switch. So not only will it begin to affect the person in the workspace, but it will affect the quality of their work, the colleagues eventually, and then the ripple effects could continue in a negative way overall. So it's, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add, I would agree with you, Tierra. Self-awareness and emotional development are critical. And it's about identifying and managing implicit biases. And let's be reminded, implicit biases are not known. We don't know. That's why they're called implicit or unconscious, because we're not aware of them. So I'll just give you a quick example. I was eating breakfast at an American breakfast restaurant one day, and I was had some salsa, and I thought it was so good. I wanted to tell the owner how good it was. So I saw two people in the corner of the restaurant. An Asian woman was talking to about a 65-year-old gray-haired white man. And so when the waitress came over to me, I caught myself, but I started to ask for that. Hey, is that the owner there? That I want to give him some feedback. But I stopped myself and said, hey, can you have the owner come and chat with me? Well, sure enough, it was the Asian woman. And in my mind, I just did not envision that it was the Asian woman running this American restaurant. I just knew it was the 65-year-old white gray-haired guy. Was that because I'm racist? No. Is it because it's discriminatory? No. It's just that based upon my prior experiences, that's how I viewed Hey, it's American restaurant. It's probably. So that's an unconscious bias or implicit bias that, again, it's not purposeful. It's just a bias. So we just have to be aware of what are our biases, to take time to reflect on those. Obviously, training helps to create environments where people can really learn to start reflecting on those and to extract some of those and then to face them. And then when you know about it, then you can address it. And the last thing I would say is our intentions don't always reflect the impact we have on others. And so if we say, for example, I'm going to say something that may offend someone, so I'm going to tell you that it may offend someone because as I'm using it as an example, okay? But I remember I would get excited, somebody on my team, a lady that had a great accomplishment, I'd say, "You go, girl, that was awesome." And my intention was, "You are so awesome. I mean, great accomplishment. You knocked it out of the park." But the impact that I may have had on her was, no, he didn't just call me girl. I'm a grown woman, right? I'm thinking, so my intentions were good. The impact was negative. So what we need to be held accountable to is not our intentions. People don't care about our intentions. People care about our behavior. So when we get to managing implicit bias, it's okay. Yes, I have good intentions, but what is my behavior and what's the impact of that behavior on others? And the only way I can get that impact is to ask for feedback, which is so critically important. And I'll just end with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Curtis and Tierra. And I want to just highlight something that I came across with respect to emotional intelligence. So it says here, emotional intelligence refers to your ability to perceive, control, manage, and evaluate your emotions. And emotional intelligence can be responsible for up to 85% of your personal and professional success, according to Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence. So that's really key in terms of, understanding how your emotions impact your behavior and how, and separating that intent versus impact, because that takes some sort of empathy, right? You have to understand how something may be received by someone versus how you think you're, going about it, and understanding the potential disparity there, and making adjustments so that you can have great relationships with people. And it's really important to have that focus of self-awareness, emotional and spiritual development. And it's actually part of one of the tenets of conscious capitalism, of conscious leadership. You can't be a conscious leader if you're not aware of these things and you don't have a certain level of emotional intelligence. So that's something to really keep in mind in terms of having an equitable business work environment and bringing the best out of your teams. So I'm gonna whittle it down to one last question so that we can move on and open it up to Q&A. So I'm trying to decide which one here is the best question to ask to close it out here. I might kind of combine these two. So we're talking about racial equality and advocacy for inclusivity in business. So to what extent do you think that business is responsible for addressing and correcting these inequities? And then following, what can we do as citizens and business people to correct these systemic issues?
Well, businesses are definitely essential parts of our communities. Businesses should utilize, I'm so sorry, my daughter. Okay, baby, go ahead. Sorry.
Tell her we said hello.
Everybody said hi, baby. Businesses should definitely utilize their platforms to raise awareness, exclaim their zero tolerance, and set the bar for that if you disagree with promoting initiatives that relate to minority communities, or if you disagree with equality or inclusivity statements that are being released, then is it too blunt to say then shop elsewhere or to dine elsewhere? I mean, I guess there's a way that you can go about saying that, but honestly, so for BBB, we have standards for trust, and the businesses that don't uphold those standards for trust, we retract their BBB accreditation, because honestly, the trust factor for consumers, it's a big thing. So it's something that businesses should use their platforms for to promote what they believe in. And as citizens and business people, we can right these wrongs by standing behind our words and continuing to voice our concerns on with the platforms that we have access to, always encouraging diversity, equality, and inclusivity in personal and professional settings. So and basically being an example, and again, exclaiming your zero tolerance, it all goes beyond words, it's actions as well. So.
Yeah, I concur. Yeah, to your first question around to what extent do you think business should be held accountable for correcting inequities between racial groups? I think they should be held accountable, but by whom? All right, that's the question. And some would suggest, government engagement and so on. And I don't really have a strong opinion on that. However, I do believe that there are two segments that are holding companies accountable, and that's their employees and their customers. Between those two, customers, for example, many customers are requiring that when they work with organizations, that they work with organizations that value diversity, and they need to see it. And in some cases, they're asking for their strategy. And if they don't have one, then they're not choosing to do work with those companies. So customers are stepping up to hold their businesses accountable, and employees are making their voices heard. I had the privilege of, through our work that we do at LeadSelf, interviewing a ton of employees, especially following the George Floyd incident, as well as all the others that really opened up opportunity for dialogue. And in listening to employees, I found, number one, I was encouraged because as there was increased awareness, there was, and I'm talking about mostly non-Black employees, were absolutely motivated to be engaged and make a difference. And that was so encouraging, and pushing their organizations on, hey, we don't just want statements, but we want action. And this is what action looks like for us. So I think there's great opportunity for employees to intentionally and actively hold companies accountable. And lastly, as citizens and business people, how we can right these wrongs. I think it all starts with ourselves. We can point the finger all day long that they should do this and they should do that, but the greatest leadership challenge is leading oneself, and it starts with looking within to say, okay, how can I educate myself more? I'll be honest with you, as a Black man in America, I didn't know very much at all about my history. I wasn't taught in school, and didn't think to study it myself until later in my years. And so, what are we doing to educate ourselves, and not just educate ourselves, but be intentional about learning about opposing views, so that we can have a balanced perspective and challenge our biases. And I think that's critical. And then share what you're learning with others. So that's what I have to add. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to anyone who would like to speak that we haven't heard from.
There was, this is Corey, everyone. There was a question in the chat box that I want to make sure is asked. Luke, if you're on and want to ask it, please go ahead and unmute yourself. If I can go ahead and read it too, if that's easiest.
Hello, this is Luke Amargo. Super glad to be here. Forgive me if my audio is a little bad. I have a bad connection, but one of the questions I want to ask is the role of technology when it comes to the endeavors and the efforts you're talking about. And has there been any great success utilizing technology to really bridge some of these gaps that are very concerning? How does technology play a role in what we're doing?
Who was it that just asked that question?
His name's Luke.
Luke?
Mhm.
Yeah, Luke, I would be curious as to your perspective on that. You obviously have some knowledge that informed that question. Love to hear your initial thoughts on that.
Yes, so I really appreciate you throwing it back our way. So where I happen to work, we utilize a lot of polls, and we also utilize some software where it allows anonymity for people to really not report, but necessarily tell us how they're feeling. Another thing we also utilize is we use a lot of mental health awareness, and things such as check-ins and having them have the opportunity to talk to someone outside of the company, and our organization pays for it. So that's something that's done all virtually. So those are two things that come to mind for brain health, but also allowing people to tell us how they're doing in terms of diversity in the workplace, for lack of a better term, and if there's any ways we could improve. But I was wondering if there's any other ideas when it comes to technologies for people to improve on and really capitalize on it as we progress in society.
Yeah. I don't know, Tierra, if you had any comments on that.
I don't believe so. I believe that using technology for, like, as you said, Luke, the polls or different methods within the organization to gather feedback internally and externally, and also using social media as a platform to voice your opinions and basically the business's stance or statement on a certain initiative could definitely go a long way as well, especially if the business's social media has a lot of their consumers or followers on there, that they can see that it's not just the words or a statement that was put out. It was there's more of an action being placed behind those words as well. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, I would just add, and thank you, Luke. I wasn't just trying to push back on you, but I really thought you would probably have something to add, and you did. So thank you for that. I would also just add that technology such as Glassdoor, where employees flat out get to say exactly what's on their minds, what their experience is like working at these organizations, and organizations to be intentional about reading that information and taking all of that data into consideration as they're working with their existing employee base to improve in diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So I would just add that point to what you've already said.
Who else has a question? Feel free to unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear your voice as well. If you don't have access to a mic, type it in the chat and I'll try and catch it too.
I have a question. This is Amber Goff. It's two-part. The first part is really kind of more of a request, because I'm certain you'll have a lot of thoughts about this. But the first is, as we're becoming more aware, I've definitely been doing some studying and research and trying to become more aware myself. But I would love, I know you're already planning to send an email with books and whatnot. I would love for books, podcasts, great ways to educate myself, because as I've been researching this, I've learned that I feel a little bit guilty. Thank you so much for taking this time and educating us, because I know it's probably difficult for you all, because you have to talk about things that are probably not easy to talk about. And I really appreciate you taking the time to educate me as a white woman. So thank you. But secondly, my next question. So please, even if there are things we haven't mentioned, books, podcasts, whatever, please include that in the email that Corey plans to send out to us. But I'm thinking a lot about allyship and really what I can do to help dismantle this oppressive system that's existing. Outside of just voting, what are some actionable items that I can be doing?
Great question. I will comment if no one else has jumped in yet.
I think you got this one, Curtis, don't you?
Okay.
No,
I will. First of all, I admire you, Amber, for wanting to be an ally, for even asking that question. That's appreciated. I think one of the things I would recommend is first continue on the endeavor to seek to understand. How can you be intentional about interviewing, talking with people, obviously reading, and you're going to see these great resources that are going to be coming out, but just trying to better understand others' worlds that you're wanting to be an ally for, so that you have more context and knowledge before you jump in. And secondly, maybe ask these same people, what would allyship look like for them? Because many of them would say, it's certainly not you helping me because I'm lower and I need help. So I need you to step in and kind of move some barriers for me. Most don't look at allyship that way. Most look at allyship as that you are equally disturbed by, agitated by, you equally have a strong desire to make a difference for the sake of society and the community at large. And you're driven because you see the impacts, you see the benefits of the needed change happening. So that would be the reason you'd want to be an ally. But they will tell you more, better than anyone else is I would ask them, what does allyship mean to you? How can I help? What makes sense? What would be offensive? And what would actually be helpful? So those are a couple of things that I would just suggest.
Tierra, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I know that, for example, within the BBB, we're actually creating a survey to go out to our accredited businesses. We have a little over 20,000 accredited businesses across Greater Arizona and Southern California. So we want to get some feedback from them, and we want to hear exactly what it is that that they're looking for, what we can do, and what they need right now. So that's maybe something that you can do. I'm not too sure I'm not familiar with what you're doing currently for a business, but if you have a consumer base that you can reach out to in the form of a survey, and just word it for just direct feedback so that you can know as a business owner what you can truly do to make an impact and see that change within your general area.
And Amber, I would add just a couple of more things. First of all, Marie Young just gave us all a link to an article she wrote about this. So thank you for that. That specifically talks about white allyship. So that's in the chat. So we should all click on that and read that article. And I would just also add, it's not always the big stuff, Amber. It's you're in a meeting and you hear one of your coworkers suggest an idea who happens to be a female, and no one says anything, and a male 30 seconds later says the same thing, and they're like, yeah. So allyship looks like, hey, call that out. Can I share an observation with you that I just observed on this call, right? And call it out and facilitate a conversation about it. If you're in a leadership position and you see pay disparity, address it. If you see that there's a disparity between kind of who's being promoted and who's not, and so on. So just in your everyday to day, outside of just this, I want to go be an ally, this initiative, but what can I do each and every day? Looking for ways that you can step in and call things out when necessary and facilitate dialogue around it, and be able to institute changes where you have the authority to do so.
Hi, I'm S. Marie. I just wanted to thank you for this panel. And Amber, thank you for bringing up about white allyship. It's something obviously I have contemplated for a while because I wrote this article, and it does have a lot of links that I researched on. And I've just been really trying to understand from the white perspective and the Black perspective. I'm also reading a book called The Soul of Black Folks, just to get the history of it, by W.B. Du Bois. And it's just an incredible book that goes back to the history of our country from the perspective of the Black experience. You know, when all this stuff with diversity started coming up, I was thinking, well, you know, it's not my thing. I'm not, you know, a minority. And the more I educated myself, I realized it's not their problem, it's a white problem. And it's up to myself and white people to get educated and to learn the impact and the history, because it's largely ignorance. Like you were saying, Curtis, you didn't know Black history, but we don't really know white history and our white privilege either, and what we've been given. And it's a rude awakening to realize this disparity is baked into our culture from the very beginning, and it goes on still today. So the more we can educate ourselves, the more that it will shift. And I also love what you said, Curtis, about the self-awareness. You know, as a conscious leadership coach, that's just my whole mission. In all aspects of conscious leadership, conscious capitalism, conscious diversity, it all starts with emotional intelligence and self-awareness.
Thank you. I just want to add to what you were saying. Do you go by Marie or S. Marie?
S. Marie.
Okay, S. Marie. Thank you for your comments. And there's a lady by the name, you guys will get this in the resources, but her name is Robin D'Angelo. She wrote a book entitled White Fragility.
Yes.
And she just helps readers, Caucasian readers especially, think about what it means to be white. And it's pretty powerful. I'm in the process of reading it now, but so highly suggested. And if you just want to quickly kind of get her take on it without reading the book, if you just Google and YouTube White Fragility, there's a great 1 hour, I think it's an hour and 20-minute presentation she does that is quite insightful. So just put that out there for you.
Hi, this is Delinda Forsyth. I'm the CEO and founder of an organization called Innovative Commercial Environments. It's an office and hospitality furniture dealership. And I've been contemplating this for about 2 years now, this diversity in our businesses. And I belong to quite a few different organizations. One of them is Athena, and Athena supports women in STEM careers. And there's a lot of data that Athena puts out of why organizations that employ diversity and inclusivity are more profitable. And organizations, you know, you got to look at the mind of a CEO. What's going to make us more profitable? What's going to make us stand out? What's going to attract and retain talent? Which is why I got so attracted to conscious capitalism last year when I was first exposed to the idea. And most of my employees are female, and most of them are millennial. And last year I asked, hey, let's put out a survey asking people to identify with how they identify racially. And I got shot down that even asking that question was racist. And I said, well, if we don't know where we're starting from, how do we know we're moving the needle and we're improving? And I really wanted to do that. And, you know, come a year later, one of my employees, and Corey has heard this story 100 times, came to me and said, hey, I know that you fight for gender equality. That is, you know, it motivates you in every aspect of your life. It's one of the reasons you started this company. And especially young women, and Haby, you were saying something about the way you were treated when you went on vacation. Boy, I was terrified of going on for vacation for like 20 years because I'd come back and I'd lose clients. Well, hey, you know, I know you were chasing that client for a year, but you went on vacation and you weren't here when they came in. And it was a very, very frustrating thing. And it really motivated me to start the company. Anyway, moving forward, I get this request from a coworker, Sharia, what are you doing about racial equality? And I said, that is very difficult for me to understand and have a position on because I haven't experienced it. And that's what our HR consultant said, that it is not the position of an organization to put out a racial equality statement. You don't have to do that. And I thought about that for about a second, and I thought, boy, that is weak. That's not the type of leader I am, and I'm not going to say that. So Sharia and I crafted a message for the company, and we put that out. We put out a letter, and it went over really, really, really well. And I would say that we need to do more. And I have been very, very busy writing this book that I'm writing, but I'm ready. I've been attending quite a few of these seminars, webinars, reading books, and I understand now. I'm beginning to understand what we can do as a community, as a white person, as a business person, to change this narrative. And one of the things that I read is that 45% of Black-owned businesses closed their doors this year. That's a huge percentage, and that doesn't help our society. That puts us all back. And this is a human problem. I see us all as humans. I see us all as Americans. And this is a very difficult conversation to have. But the minute we take this out of the darkness and we shine a light on it and we make it an equitable problem, that's when we can move the needle forward and change how we elevate everybody's voice and everybody in this community. So that's kind of my story and my perspective.
Thank you. Thank you, Delinda. So I have just a thought or a question. I believe in reality, in that, you know, there's a lot of things going on in reality, but also believe in reality there's some bright spots, some positivity, maybe more than we realize sometimes. And also know progress isn't a straight path, right? There's going to be lots of twists and turns and backs and forths. But just curious for you, Curtis and Tierra, with your work with the BBB and personally and your work with LeadSelf, what's giving you hope at the moment? What do you hold on that kind of inspires some hope for you in our future? Yeah.
I'll be fast. What we're doing right now, we're talking about it. And it's a diverse population that's on this call that is having dialogue about this. And it is a human problem. We're in it together. And I smile sincerely because I feel like we are in this together. And one thing that was clearly revealed during all the marching and protests and so on was the diversity that you saw. If you looked, man, in many cases all over the world, there were more non-Blacks marching than there were Blacks. And that gave me hope, and continued dialogue around these topics that we can increase our education and learn from one another gives me a lot of hope.
I like that, Curtis. Well, for my side, I believe that what's giving me hope right now is that, again, yes, people are talking about the issues that we've tried to voice our opinions on for a long time now. And also the fact that people are voting and registering to vote, and realizing that, because for the longest I've always heard people saying like, my vote's not going to count, so why am I going to vote? But all of those people that I've heard that from are actually registering to vote and voting. And I'm trying to have a positive mindset of the future, which everyone should definitely. So that's kind of what's giving me hope right now. So
I'll just add, I think, you know, there's a shift right now, especially in this country and around the globe, around like, okay, we're not just individuals here, you know, because especially in this country, it's very individualistic, like, you know, and I can make it on my own and, you know, like figure it out, bootstrap, whatever. But there's like this increasing like movement towards coming together and this communal, you know, aspect that's happening. I mean, from my culture, it's very communal. My parents are from Guinea, West Africa. It's very communal, and I think people are starting to see that value. And like Delinda said, it's a human problem. You know, we're not just individuals. Like we have power collectively, and although we've inherited these systems and there's major issues here, we have the power collectively to change it, to do something about it. And so that gets me excited. And I'm very hopeful for that. Like we can do something about it. We don't have to just accept what's been happening for decades, for centuries. We can create a new America. We can create a new world that is equitable, that is just and fair, and spread this idea of conscious capitalism and solving the world's problems and providing value to all. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Haby. Thank you, Tierra. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate you being here with us and having this conversation and dialogue, and you know, and we need to just continue it. That's my only encouragement. It just needs to continue, and you know, the always opportunity for learning, growth, and sharing. So thank you all. Wishing you a wonderful day. Like we shared, we'll send some more information out to you all, or some follow up in the next day or so as we collect those resources and get it out there to you. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at info@ccsandiego.org or visit our website at ccsandiego.org as well. And we look forward to staying connected. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you guys for
Thank
listening
you.
in.